If you simply just didn't bury your talent half the time, they probably wouldn't want to be released from WWE. And now that's why you're probably thinking, just throw more money at them. And that might solve it and it might not. But to me, it just doesn't make sense. Hey guys, best comments down below. I'm going to hook you guys up with free merchandise. Leave your t-shirt or hoodie size that you wear, and I'm going to pick some of the best comments. I'm going to hook you guys up with free merchandise. Welcome back to Destination Pro Wrestling. My name is Tony, and today it's January 20th, 2019. We got a lot of cool things happening in the pro wrestling world, and more specifically, All Elite Wrestling. So, for story number one, let's talk about it. That's right, guys. AEW Executive Vice President Cody Rhodes was stopped by somebody from TMZ this past week at an airport, and this guy just simply wanted to know what's going to happen with AEW and whether or not they would be interested in working with people from UFC. Now, Cody Rhodes actually was pretty much into the idea of doing this if these people truly have a passion for pro wrestling. In fact, he even states, "That's one of my big knocks. You can't teach passion." So as long as it's somebody who's passionate about wrestling and knows it's kind of a hard gig, I can imagine that would be a cool little crossover. Now, I've always been really cool with the idea of Cody Rhodes working with other people outside of WWE, outside of pro wrestling. And the reason for that is because pro wrestling always has room for people that are famous outside of the industry. In fact, you guys remember Stephen Amell competed in a WWE match at SummerSlam, and then he even competed at All In and had an incredible match thanks to the guys from the Elite. So when we see certain actors and certain people from outside pro wrestling get involved in pro wrestling, I know a lot of times people aren't really happy about that because they're not truly a wrestler, but some people have done a really good job. So now it really makes me wonder whether certain individuals from UFC can jump over to AEW and make a big name. That's of course when a reporter from TMZ also asked Cody Rhodes, well, what about the idea of Khabib Nurmagomedov? And Cody Rhodes simply states that they will keep him in consideration. They will keep that in mind. Now, if you guys didn't know, Khabib Nurmagomedov defeated Conor McGregor in really convincing fashion. And that was a really, I don't know if it was a shock to you guys. It was kind of a shock to me because I'm just a huge Conor fan. But nonetheless, it was such a good fight. And there was a lot of things that Khabib did very well. And he pretty much took some of that star power away from Conor. Although Conor is a very good marketable athlete, having that loss from Khabib does not help his brand when now he's having conversations about fighting Donald Cerrone or some of these other guys. Obviously, the fight that everybody wants to see is Conor and Khabib, or Conor and Nate Diaz, the two guys who really beat the living crap out of him. So then it makes me really curious, does Khabib fit in a pro wrestling ring? Well, if you guys didn't know, a while ago, after the Khabib and Conor fight, WWE actually expressed interest in Khabib. Khabib talked openly about possibly wanting to go there if the money was right, and that was something that never really came to fruition. Now, if you guys didn't know, AEW's got a billionaire family backing them, and this family's got more money than the McMahons. If you're really trying to bring attention to your product, then the first thing that you're going to do is absolutely make the call to Khabib. And the reason why is Khabib is 27-0 in the octagon, hasn't lost, and that's like the best part about this entire thing. This guy is a true animal. I mean, if you guys didn't see the clip of him wrestling a bear back when he was a little kid, you guys should look that up on YouTube because it's actually really awesome. But you got to remember why this move actually makes sense. AEW is trying to create a professional wrestling brand built on rankings, wins, and losses. And Khabib being 27-0 coming into a wrestling ring, he's going to bring some of that star power that's not overly exaggerated, and on top of that, he's still a big enough name in the mainstream world because of his fighting skills. And that's exactly what AEW should be focusing on when trying to attract a new audience to their product. The fact that Cody even says that they will keep him in mind is really interesting because Cody Rhodes knows that AEW does have a shortage of talent, and obviously they do need some big names. You guys saw how great things played out for Stephen Amell being a Hollywood actor. And listen, I know not every celebrity or not every person outside of pro wrestling, is going to translate very well. But with Ronda Rousey being successful, with Stephen Amell being pretty successful, there is room for that in the industry, and I could totally see Cody Rhodes taking advantage of that. For the second story of the day, we're going to talk about a report that recently came out about Vince McMahon not being happy with certain WWE talent who have come out and asked for their releases. Obviously, as you guys know, wrestling media, people have been talking about certain superstars leaving WWE, Mike and Maria Kanellis, which then we saw Maria Kanellis say, no, this is not true. And then Mike Kanellis pretty much hasn't really said anything at all. And now certain talent, obviously we know about the revival. We've heard about possible situations with Dolph Ziggler and Zack Ryder. And obviously this is going to anger WWE. And it is said that Vince McMahon is really upset about this because he wants people to feel like they are company people, whatever. And really what you guys need to know here, Vince McMahon does not want his talent to go to AEW. And that's exactly why he's angry. It's not about the fact that AEW is a big competitor or a big threat, but a lot of these names have become big names because of WWE, and they don't want other companies taking advantage of that. So what Vince McMahon is really angry about is the fact that now he's going to probably have to pay a lot more money and offer contract extensions to keep some of the talent. Now, this is actually something that's been reported on a lot recently. If you guys haven't seen it, Dolph Ziggler, a lot of people were offered different positions within WWE, different roles, and this is obviously WWE's goal to make them happy and make them stay committed to the WWE brand. But for some talent, it's not about the money, it's not about the role. Sometimes it's just about where they are on the card. Guy like Zack Ryder hasn't been on TV. Mike Kanellis, Maria Kanellis weren't doing anything since they came in. And then this actually struck a whole conversation about certain talent in WWE and whether or not they just went to WWE for a quick payday so that way they can go back to the indies afterwards. I mean, there's a lot of drama in that regard, and I can totally see why Vince McMahon would be angry. But one thing that's really stuck with me for a long time is the idea that Vince McMahon simply doesn't put over a lot of his talent that he has. And what I mean by that, I get that it's a business. I guarantee, there's a lot of guys out there that aren't fit for a world championship. But at the same time, too, there are certain superstars that people have obviously watched, Samoa Joe being one of them. Why hasn't this guy held a world title yet? There's these questions that go through the minds of fans. And the reason for that, guys, is because, there's no reason for it to not happen. So, look, certain guys, Zack Ryder, the Kurt Hawkins in the WWE, these kind of guys, they're not going to be anything big in AEW if they were to leave. Dolph Ziggler may or may not be anything big in AEW, but at the end of the day, they're WWE guys, and if there's a whole bunch of commotion coming out to the public like, hey, these guys are trying to leave, it's not a good look for WWE. And on top of that, it's going to cause Vince McMahon to really do whatever he can to keep these people employed to WWE. Now, this is a huge concern for a lot of people because there's really no reason why they should be signing talent if they're not using it. But then again, things don't always make sense. All right, and the last story for today is definitely interesting because now it's got a lot of people talking not only about AEW, but professional wrestling in general. If you guys didn't know, the Young Bucks simply just evaded 2 different indie companies this past week. They invaded Bar Wrestling and now Defy Wrestling in Seattle. And this has got a lot of people talking because obviously people tend to forget that Young Bucks are actually still wrestlers. So they did compete this past weekend for these indie shows. They showed up, they did their thing. And now this is why people are talking. It's not simply about the idea that the Young Bucks are wrestling again. The idea is that Young Bucks may be working very closely to start tying up some deals with indie companies to sign with AEW to have some sort of working agreement. Now, if you guys didn't know, at the Jacksonville rally for Double or Nothing, when they made the big announcement, they also talked about a partnership with a company out in China to start bringing some of the talent from China to All Elite Wrestling. And that's actually a really, really big deal, a big deal that a lot of people aren't really starting to grasp just yet. But talent exchange is really huge internationally, especially when you're a company like All Elite Wrestling. There is some discussions about them having an international TV deal. What TV deal may that be? Nobody knows just yet, but obviously when you start getting talent from all over the world, that's a huge deal. So now that AEW is in fact invading indie wrestling shows, it's really interesting to see which indie companies will be working closely with AEW. But as you can imagine, with a roster of about 17 people now, that's what we know as of right now. Even though we know only 13 have been announced, we know that 17 stars are signed to AEW. Obviously, All Elite Wrestling is going to need more talent. They will need a roster, and having that relationship with other indie companies is what's going to help them get things off off the ground. Now, that's actually really interesting, though, because WWE has an incredible relationship with a lot of companies out there, and obviously we don't know which company will choose WWE, which company will choose AEW, but this is going to be a very, very interesting year going into the summer of 2019, because we're going to start hearing some of these signings, and regardless of where some of these people go, it's going to be interesting. So with that being said, my name is Tony from Destination Pro Wrestling. I will see you guys tomorrow.
You have reached your destination.